One was a flying printing press and radio station. Another could deliver 80 tons of cargo to an unprepared dirt runway. A third carried the Soviet space shuttle on its back, and the largest of them lifted a payload heavier than the Statue of Liberty, together with its pedestal. These aircraft were not designed simply to carry people or cargo. Each one was created to solve a problem that had previously seemed almost impossible. Most were built in very small numbers. Some existed as just a single completed aircraft, and all of them were born in the Soviet Union, a country where the size of an airplane was often not only an engineering necessity, but also a demonstration of the state's technological power. There's no single international boundary separating heavy aircraft from super heavy ones. Different sources use different classifications. Some describe aircraft with a maximum takeoff weight above 250 tons as super heavy. Others reserve the term for machines weighing more than 350 tons. So not every aircraft in this story formally belongs to the same weight class. The Ant-20 weighed several times less than the An-225. The VMT was lighter than the An-124. And one of these aircraft was not originally designed as a transport at all. But every one of them was a giant of its era, and each left a distinctive mark on aviation history. One of the first Soviet aircraft to resemble a flying building was the Kalinin K-7. Development began in Kharkiv in 1931 under aircraft designer Konstantin Kalinin. The airplane was intended to serve several possible roles: heavy bomber, passenger airliner, or military transport. At the heart of the design was an enormous wing spanning 53 meters, or 174 feet, with a surface area of more than 450 square meters. In some places, the wing was 2.3 meters, more than 7 feet thick. Passenger compartments, fuel tanks, and equipment were meant to be housed inside it. One proposed civilian version could have carried as many as 120 passengers. A military transport version was designed for 112 fully equipped paratroopers. The landing gear sat inside two enormous pods beneath the wing. In the military configuration, these pods were also intended to contain gun positions. The aircraft was originally supposed to use 6 engines, but they did not provide enough power. A 7th engine with a pusher propeller was therefore installed at the rear. The K-7 made its first flight on August 11, 1933. Serious problems appeared almost immediately. The structure suffered from powerful vibrations. The cause was resonance. The vibration frequency of the engines interacted with the natural frequency of parts of the airframe. In the early 1930s, engineers had limited ability to predict and model such forces. On November 21, 1933, one of the tail booms failed during another test flight. The aircraft lost control and crashed. 14 people aboard were killed, along with 1 person on the ground. Rumors of sabotage later surrounded the disaster, but structural failure caused by vibration is considered the most likely explanation. 2 additional K-7s were planned after the accident, but the project was eventually abandoned. The only completed aircraft made just 7 test flights. The K-7 never became a passenger airliner or heavy bomber, but it demonstrated how bold Soviet aircraft designers were willing to be as early as the beginning of 1930s. Unlike the experimental K-7, the TB-3 heavy bomber entered mass production and was used operationally. It first flew in 1930. For its time, the TB-3 was an advanced machine, an enormous 4-engine all-metal monoplane. Many heavy aircraft of the period still resembled enlarged First World War biplanes. More than 800 TB-3s were built. By the beginning of the Second World War, the aircraft was already considered obsolete. It was slow. Its landing gear did not retract, and its corrugated metal skin created considerable aerodynamic drag. But its size and lifting capacity allowed it to serve as much more than a bomber. The TB-3 transported soldiers, artillery, fuel, and other supplies. It could even carry a small T-27 tankette beneath its fuselage. Its most unusual role, however, came with Project Zvezno. Soviet engineer Vladimir Vakhmistrov proposed turning the heavy bomber into a flying aircraft carrier. Several small fighters were attached to the TB-3's wings and fuselage. Depending on the configuration, it could carry between 2 and 5 aircraft. The fighters relied on the mothership during takeoff and the long flight toward the target. As they approached enemy territory, they detached and continued independently. The project did not remain a purely experimental idea. During the Second World War, a combination of 1 TB-3 and 2 I-16 fighters was used in actual combat missions. The fighters carried heavy bombs that they could not have lifted together with enough fuel for a long-range mission. The TB-3 carried them close to their target, after which they detached and attacked targets in Romania. The result was a genuine airborne aircraft carrier, created decades before modern projects involving aircraft-launched vehicles. The TB-3 was not the heaviest aircraft in Soviet history, but it could carry troops, bombs, a small tank, and several other airplanes. That alone makes it one of the most unusual giants of Soviet aviation. In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union wanted an aircraft designed not simply to carry passengers, but to make an impression. The Maxim Gorky was conceived as a gigantic propaganda aircraft, a flying symbol of the new Soviet state. It was named after the writer Maxim Gorky, and its construction marked the 40th anniversary of his literary career. The aircraft was designed at the Central Aerohydrodynamic Institute under Andrei Tupolev. It made its first flight on June 17, 1934. For its time, the dimensions were astonishing. The Ant-20 was almost 33 meters or 108 feet long, with a wingspan of 63 meters or 207 feet. That wingspan was only a few meters shorter than that of the much later Boeing 747. Its normal operating weight was approximately 42 tons, while its maximum takeoff weight in some configurations may have reached roughly 53 tons. 8 engines were needed to lift the giant into the air. 6 were mounted on the wings. 2 more were installed in a tandem arrangement above the fuselage. Together, they produced approximately 7,200 horsepower. The aircraft's maximum speed was only around 220 kilometers per hour, or 137 miles per hour. But speed was not the point. The Maxim Gorky was designed as a complete airborne propaganda center. It carried a powerful radio transmitter, loudspeakers, a photographic laboratory, film equipment, a library, and a small printing press. Leaflets printed during a flight could be dropped over the cities below. The aircraft even had a pneumatic mail system connecting different parts of the interior. A separate onboard generator supplied electricity to all this equipment, an unusual feature for an aircraft of the period. Inside were comfortable seats, tables with lamps, washrooms, and a small buffet. Some usable spaces were located inside the aircraft's enormous wings. Sources disagree about the Ant-20's intended capacity. Estimates range from several dozen to around 70 passengers. But this was not a conventional airliner, and it was never used on regular passenger routes. Its main purpose was to perform demonstration flights. One such flight on May 18, 1935, became its last. 2 smaller aircraft accompanied the giant during a film and photo shoot, emphasizing its immense size. Nikolai Blagin, flying a small I-5 fighter, attempted a difficult aerobatic maneuver close to the Ant-20. The fighter lost speed and struck the giant's wing. Both aircraft fell into a residential area near Moscow. Sources report different casualty totals, but the most commonly cited figure is 45 dead, including those aboard the Ant-20, the fighter pilot, and people on the ground. An improved six-engine version, the Ant-20 bis, was later constructed, but the age of giant propaganda aircraft was already approaching its end. During the 1950s, the Soviet Union needed a passenger aircraft capable of operating long-distance international routes without making repeated refueling stops. Designing a completely new aircraft would take years. The Tupolev Design Bureau therefore used the Tu-95 strategic bomber as its starting point. The result was the Tu-114, one of the largest and fastest turboprop passenger aircraft ever built. It made its first flight on November 15, 1957. From the Tu-95, the new airliner inherited its swept wings and four enormously powerful NK-12 turboprop engines. Each engine drove two sets of contra-rotating propellers. The propellers measured more than 5.5 meters, around 18 feet, in diameter. Because of those huge propellers, the aircraft required unusually tall landing gear. Its passenger cabin stood so high above the ground that many airports did not have stairs capable of reaching its doors. The Tu-114 could fly at approximately 850 to 880 kilometers per hour, between 530 and 547 miles per hour. That was close to the cruising speed of early jet airliners. It could travel more than 10,000 kilometers, or roughly 6,200 miles, and carry more than 200 passengers in a high-density configuration. Aeroflot usually operated in a more comfortable layout with around 170 seats. On long-distance flights, some versions included sleeping compartments and even a proper dining area. The kitchen was located on a lower deck. Meals were sent up to the passenger cabin using a small elevator. In 1959, Nikita Khrushchev used a Tu-114, still undergoing testing, for the first official visit by the Soviet leader to the United States. Some specialists considered the flight too risky. The aircraft was new, and its engines still required further refinement. Khrushchev insisted on using it. Andrei Tupolev was so confident in the aircraft that he sent his own son Alexei on the same flight. After it landed, an unexpected problem emerged. The American airport stairs were not tall enough to reach the door of the unusually high aircraft. Suitable equipment had to be found before the passengers could disembark. The Tu-114 later operated routes from Moscow to Khabarovsk, Tokyo, Havana, and other distant cities. Only 32 were built. Its commercial career was relatively short. During the 1970s, turboprop aircraft were gradually replaced by jet-powered Il-62s. But the Tu-114 still carried more than 6 million passengers and set several aviation speed records. It was not a cargo aircraft, yet it holds a special place among Soviet aviation giants, an intercontinental passenger airliner with the heart of a strategic bomber. The next Soviet giant was created not for propaganda or passenger travel, but for the military. During the early 1960s, the Soviet Union needed an aircraft capable of quickly transporting troops, armored vehicles, and missile systems over enormous distances. The task was given to the Antonov Design Bureau in Kyiv. The An-22 made its first flight in 1965. Serial production began at an aircraft plant in Tashkent, the capital of Soviet Uzbekistan. According to the Antonov Company, 66 aircraft were manufactured between 1965 and 1976. The Antei was almost 58 meters or 190 feet long, with a wingspan of more than 64 meters or 210 feet. The maximum takeoff weight of later versions reached approximately 250 tons. Maximum payload was as much as 80 tons, or more than 176,000 pounds. But its engines were perhaps its most striking feature. The An-22 used 4 NK-12MA turboprop engines, each producing approximately 15,000 horsepower. Every engine drove two enormous contra-rotating propellers. The same basic engine family powered the Tu-95 strategic bomber. The distinctive roar was impossible to mistake for the sound of a jet aircraft. The An-22 remains the largest turboprop aircraft ever to enter operational service. Its cargo compartment could hold as many as 290 troops, or around 150 fully equipped paratroopers. Vehicles, weapons, and supply platforms weighing many tons could be dropped by parachute directly from the aircraft. But payload was not the Antei's only advantage. Its enormous wings, powerful engines, and complex multi-wheel landing gear allowed it to use comparatively short and unprepared dirt runways. This meant heavy cargo could be delivered to areas without conventional airports. The claim that an An-22 was the only transport aircraft capable of landing on unpaved surfaces is incorrect. Many military transports were designed to operate under similar conditions. What made the Antei unique was the combination of immense size, heavy payload, turboprop engines, and the ability to operate from unprepared airfields. By the middle of the 2020s, only isolated examples remained airworthy. Giving an exact number of operational aircraft without a specific date would therefore be misleading. But the An-22 still holds its record as the largest turboprop aircraft ever placed into service. The An-22 was impressive in both size and payload, but the real workhorse of Soviet heavy transport aviation was the Il-76. By the late 1960s, the Soviet Union needed a jet-powered aircraft to replace the turboprop An-12. The new aircraft had to carry dozens of tons of cargo over several thousand kilometers, operate from short and unprepared airfields, and remain reliable in the extreme conditions of Siberia, the Arctic, and Central Asia. The project was assigned to the Ilyushin Design Bureau. The Il-76 made its first flight on March 25, 1971, and entered service in 1974. Its appearance established what later became a classic shape for heavy military transports: a high-mounted wing, 4 jet engines, a T-shaped tail, and a large loading ramp at the rear of the fuselage. The high wing left more usable space inside the cargo compartment and helped protect the engines from debris when operating from dirt airfields. Its multi-wheel landing gear allowed the crew to adjust tire pressure while moving. The aircraft could be prepared to land on concrete, snow, or relatively soft ground. Early versions of the Il-76 could carry around 40 tons. Later Soviet variants increased that figure to approximately 48 tons, while modern versions can carry more than 60. The Il-76 could not lift as much as the An-22, but it was faster, easier to operate, and better suited to regular service. Its cargo compartment could hold armored vehicles, artillery systems, trucks, or more than 100 troops. The aircraft was also used to drop soldiers, vehicles, and large cargo platforms by parachute. An entire family of specialized aircraft was developed from the Il-76. The Il-78 became an aerial refueling tanker. The A-50 received a massive radar system above the fuselage and became the Soviet counterpart to the American AWACS aircraft. Other versions served as airborne command posts, hospitals, firefighting aircraft, and laboratories used to test aviation engines. The Il-76 was not used exclusively for military operations. It delivered humanitarian aid, evacuated people from disaster zones, transported rescue equipment, and fought forest fires. The design proved so successful that production continued after the Soviet Union collapsed. If the An-225 represented the absolute limit of aviation, The Il-76 represented a different kind of achievement. Soviet engineers created a heavy transport that did not merely set a record or complete a handful of unique missions. It worked almost every day, for decades. By the 1970s, even the An-22's cargo capacity was no longer enough for the Soviet Union. The military needed a new strategic transport capable of carrying tanks, helicopters, missile systems, and other enormous pieces of equipment. The result was the An-124 Ruslan. Development began at the Antonov Design Bureau in Kyiv, and the aircraft made its first flight in December 1982. It was almost 69 meters, or 226 feet long, with a wingspan of more than 73 meters, or 240 feet. Depending on the version, maximum takeoff weight ranged from 392 to approximately 405 tons. The standard commercial version could carry up to 120 tons of cargo. Upgraded variants increased that figure to 150 tons. But the Ruslan was important for more than its size. Its entire nose could swing upward, opening the front of the cargo compartment. A large cargo ramp was also located at the rear. This allowed equipment to be loaded from both directions and greatly accelerated ground operations. The aircraft could also kneel, lowering the front of its fuselage closer to the ground. Built-in overhead cranes inside the cargo compartment meant the An-124 did not always depend on specialized loading equipment at the airport. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Ruslans entered the international commercial cargo market. They transported locomotives, industrial generators, military helicopters, spacecraft, and equipment for power stations. In some cases, the only alternative would have been to dismantle the cargo and send it by sea. The Ruslan became one of the few Soviet aircraft so useful that it continued performing commercial missions around the world, decades after the country that created it had disappeared. The next step was an aircraft designed to carry cargo too large even for the Ruslan. During the 1980s, the Soviet Union was developing the reusable Buran spaceplane and the super-heavy Energia rocket. The largest parts of the system were manufactured thousands of kilometers from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. They could not be transported using conventional railways. This led to the creation of the An-225. Its name, Mrya, means dream in Ukrainian. The aircraft was developed by the Antonov Design Bureau in the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. It made its first flight on December 21, 1988. The An-124 served as the starting point, but the fuselage was lengthened, the wings enlarged, and the number of engines increased from 4 to 6. The Mrya was 84 meters, or 276 feet long. Its wingspan measured 88.4 meters, or 290 feet, and its maximum takeoff weight reached 640 tons. It could carry cargo inside its enormous hold, or on special mounting points above the fuselage. In 1989, the Buran spaceplane was carried on its back to the Paris Air Show, where it was displayed to an international audience. Only one An-225 was fully completed. A second airframe remained unfinished. After the Soviet Union collapsed and the Buran program was cancelled, the aircraft sat unused for several years. It was restored in the early 2000s and converted into a commercial transport for unique, super-heavy cargo. In 2001, the An-225 set an absolute record by lifting a total payload of 253.82 tons. In 2009, it carried the heaviest single item ever transported by air, an industrial generator, and its loading frame weighed almost 190 tons. The aircraft established hundreds of aviation records. The claim that the An-225 retained the world's largest wingspan throughout its entire operational life, however, is outdated. In 2019, the American twin fuselage Strato-Launch Rock made its first flight with a wingspan of 117 meters. But the Mriya remained the heaviest aircraft ever built and the largest operational cargo aircraft in aviation history. The only flying An-225 was destroyed in February 2022 during the Battle of Antonov Airport in Hostomel in the opening days of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The aircraft's remains were severely damaged. Plans have been announced to build a new Mriya using parts from the unfinished second airframe and any usable components recovered from the first aircraft. But as of today, no replacement An-225 has been completed. The story of the Atlant began before the story of the Mriya. When the Soviet Union first needed to transport components of the Energia rocket and the Buran spaceplane, the An-225 did not yet exist. Engineers decided to modify an existing 3M strategic bomber designed by Vladimir Myasishchev. The result was the VMT Atlant. Its appearance is impossible to confuse with that of any other aircraft. An enormous aerodynamic container was installed above its narrow fuselage. In some configurations, the cargo was almost twice the diameter of the aircraft carrying it. This earned the VMT the unofficial nickname the Flying Barrel. The massive load disrupted the airflow and blocked the aircraft's conventional vertical tail. The designers therefore had to completely modify the tail and install two large vertical fins at the ends of the horizontal stabilizer. Separate containers were designed for different components of the Energia rocket. When the Buran spaceplane itself was transported, parts of its tail and equipment had to be removed to reduce weight and aerodynamic drag. The VMT made its first flight in April 1981. Its first flight carrying an external payload followed in January 1982. The aircraft was almost 59 meters, or 193 feet long, with a wingspan of more than 53 meters, or 174 feet. Its maximum takeoff weight was approximately 210 tons. Depending on the configuration, it could carry an external payload of around 40 to 50 tons. 3 3M airframes were used for the project. 2 were converted into flying VMTs. The third was used for static structural testing. So the common claim that 3 flying Atlants were built is incorrect. The 2 operational aircraft completed a combined total of approximately 150 flights, connected to the Energia Buran program. The VMT was always intended as a temporary solution. It could transport individual components of the space system, but its capabilities were limited. Once the An-225 became available, the Atlant was no longer needed. Both flying aircraft have survived, although neither remains operational. One is located at Zhukovsky near Moscow. The other is stored at Dyagolyevov Air Base near Ryazan. These 9 aircraft were created in different periods and for entirely different purposes. The K-7 was one of the boldest experiments of early Soviet aviation. The TB-3 carried paratroopers and light tanks, and eventually became a genuine flying aircraft carrier. The Ant-20 was designed to show Soviet citizens the scale and technological power of their young state. The Tu-114 carried passengers across continents at speeds approaching those of jet airliners. The An-22 delivered troops and heavy equipment to places without conventional airports. The Il-76 became a versatile workhorse, carrying out military, transport, rescue, and humanitarian missions. The An-124 became a practical strategic airlifter and spent decades transporting unique cargo around the world. The VMT carried components of a space transportation system on its back, and the An-225 became the culmination of this entire story. An aircraft capable of lifting more than 250 tons and setting records that remain unbroken in their category. All these machines were created without modern computer modeling or digital design systems. Their engineers worked with paper drawings, physical models, and computers far less powerful than modern smartphones. But the most important point is something else. Every one of these aircraft appeared because there was a task that an ordinary airplane could not perform. Some needed to carry another aircraft, or even a small tank. Others had to fly hundreds of passengers across an ocean, deliver heavy machinery to a dirt runway, or carry a spacecraft on their back. The engineers were not simply improving familiar designs. They had to create something that had never existed before. Which of these aircraft seems the most incredible to you? The experimental K-7 with passenger compartments inside its wing? The TB-3 carrying its own fighters? The giant Tu-114 passenger airliner? Or the An-225 Maxim, capable of lifting more than 250 tons? Tell us in the comments.